We've already covered in previous videos who we consider to be the most good and evil characters in Rick and Morty, but we still have some stuff to settle when it comes to this show. For instance, who is really the smartest in the multiverse? And who is the most incompetent? There are a lot of characters, so let's get into it. I'm Kyle with Wicked Binge, and this is Rick and Morty, Dumb to Brilliant. For this list, we'll be covering the main characters featured in the show for the first 4 seasons, starting with the most dumb and working our way up to the most brilliant. First up, it's the practically brainless. This spot is reserved for those who have a less than average intelligence, to put it nicely. Taking our gold medal of stupid is Armathy. We can't really place Armathy any higher since we don't really see much of the man he once was before he was part of Morty. The most we know is what he endured before he was reduced to existing as a simple limb. But we would wager while he wasn't the sharpest guy around, he came off as average. Our silver medal of dumb goes to Summer's friend, Trixia. Much like Armathy, we don't get a lot of development with her. She isn't shown to be particularly insightful or intelligent. She takes the role of being the desired popular girl, dressing in a version of the trope schoolgirl uniform, and jumping between relationships. When she does appear on screen, Trixia is seen talking about her interests in various men, or her preferences in bed. The only time we see her not focused on her next relationship is when she sees Summer and Beth consoling one another as giants and runs off, insisting she had to go call her mother. We'd like to think she'll be given more depth in future seasons, but for now, we have to place her this low. The bronze medal of dumb has to go to Jerry Smith. It might appear at first that we're just picking on him, but hear us out for our reasoning. Jerry has been established as unsuccessful when it comes to being a provider in their home. He messes up any job opportunity he gets, and only excels when the Galactic Federation takes over Earth and grants Jerry meaningless promotions. Jerry is easily swayed and manipulated, but always tries to reverse the roles whenever he can. When he had a chance to have Rick killed, he took it thinking he could finally get his family back, effectively blaming Rick's presence for his marriage failing. He tried throwing his own kids under the bus and claiming they were racists in order to break up with an alien huntress. When he and Beth's mythology were running rampant, Jerry's reaction was to try and hide to avoid the conflict. But we don't grant him the title of most dumb of the series because there are a few victories that Jerry managed. He was the one to use another mythologue to take out the sinister Beth that was created. And he had also been the one to help Rick utilize the weak point to kill the aliens fighting them on the roller coaster. While Jerry doesn't have a lot of success in the show, we give credit where credit is due. Next up is the maid, Lucy. We've pointed it out before, but it isn't clear if Lucy really planned anything when she took her gun to work with her. She does say to Jerry that she was disappointed that she had to watch everyone enjoy themselves doing the reenactment activities while she was stuck on the sidelines. But that doesn't really show if she was a disgruntled worker on the edge. She didn't show any clear planning, but still managed to take control over Jerry to get what she wanted from him. So at the very least, she displayed some resourcefulness, and was able to let Jerry's guard down before snapping and pulling out a weapon. Next up are the grade school students. Not the brightest, and still a ways to go from the top. Moving on to Stacy. Morty meets her after he loses his toxic side, and the first impression of her is that she doesn't make time for nonsense. She gains a lot of respect for Morty when he shows to also hold consent for anything in high regard, with the two quickly setting up a safe word. Good thing since Morty had to use it to escape his toxic side. But why Stacy threw herself in wasn't really clear. Our next spot goes to Prince Nebulon. Speaking of lack of planning, we have to place this guy and his people fairly low. Sure, they have impressive technology and spy equipment, but what good does it actually do when it's full of these little flaws? We get that it can't be easy to pull off copying the daily life of a planet that is unfamiliar to you, but considering how long they had been hounding Rick, you would think they would have managed to make the holograms a little more believable. We don't place the prince of his people lower since they did utilize the Morty well, but they didn't really have a set plan when it came to revealing the initial hologram. They claimed they wanted Rick's combination to a safe, but it's difficult to know if that was a method to make Rick panic or if they were making things up as they went, only wanting to show off that they managed to trick Rick in the slightest. Next up is another off-putting leader, King Tommy. Being able to find a way to survive in Fruppyland after being left by Beth was resourceful, but we can't be certain how much of that was Tommy using his brain, since we see how he accidentally came across the method of getting meat. In the reenactment of how he became king, Tommy was basically acting on curiosity. When Beth tries bringing Tommy back to reality, it's clear that Tommy still has the mindset of a child. He knew that Beth is the one responsible for his predicament, but he didn't recognize her when she showed up and refused to go back home with her. He reached the point where he thought eating children was appropriate and fought to stay where he could remain in charge. Next on our list, we have Reggie, the man who was the real father to Gaia's children. He shows up at the end of the episode and immediately tells Rick to shove off. While Reggie displays a great feat of godlike power, he doesn't really display any real ingenuity. He just wanted to beat Rick to a pulp because he could, and his cockiness led to him being caught off guard and killed. Taking our next spot, we have the Slut Dragons. On the one hand, they come off as wise creatures, since they've been alive for an untold amount of time. On the other hand, they are pretty easily subdued in this episode and aren't really good at reading a room, and their method of defeating the wizard was pretty odd. Who else would think they needed to partake in some weird soul orgy just to overwhelm their opponent? There was also the hoard that Morty's dragon was collecting. It didn't just consist of gold and jewels, but weird items like movies or anything shiny that caught his attention. In that sense, he acts a lot like a hoarder who collects and compiles things for just-in-case moments. That doesn't make them dumb exactly, but it showed lack of foresight. Combine that with how easily dragons are swayed when presented with a good time through drugs or other means, and you have an ancient beast that has a mindset of a teenager. Moving on, we get to the average folk. These guys are, as the name implies, pretty average in terms of intelligence. Not too smart, but not too dumb. Normies. First up in this category is the egotistical gearhead. Almost all of us know that one person in the friend group or at a party that likes to think of themselves as the philosophical type or believes that they have a higher intellect than those around them. In this show, that person is definitely Gearhead. He likes being in the spotlight and likes to use it to show off how much better he thinks he is than everyone else. He goes on for hours about the Gear Wars, unable to realize that no one wanted to hear a history lesson at the house party. And when Morty gave up his Vindicator jacket, Gearhead quickly swoops in and uses the article of clothing to impress, well, we would say women, but we don't think they were the right age for Gearhead to be pursuing. Which further proves he makes horrible choices despite his need to be the smartest guy in the room. Our next ranking goes to the morally confusing Abradolf Linkler. This guy can't even decide how he feels about anything, so it makes sense that he would be unable to really form relationships or form a complete opinion. But we don't have it in our hearts to mark him any lower. After all, Abradolf also shows a lot of awareness of his conflicting personalities, which is why he's so upset with Rick when he first meets him. He knows that he has to be careful how he interacts with people since he doesn't want to upset anyone just because he's part Hitler. This leads him to try and be a hero and become trapped in an infinite loop of being inserted into various alien monsters until he is able to break free and reappear. Next up, we have the math teacher, Mr. Goldenfold, and Principal Vagina ranked together. They're both educators responsible for the well-being of their students, but we see firsthand that the school is not great at taking care of the student body. The curriculum is lacking, to say the very least, with Mr. Goldenfold teaching basic math to students and being unable to keep anyone's attention longer than a few minutes at a time. But on the other hand, we see that he is able to use his mind to overcome unexpected obstacles, such as when he was able to control his dreams and nearly killed Rick. For Principal Vagina, he always assumes that any conflict on the grounds comes from the motivation of a hate crime, and he puts off bringing in Morty's parents, stating that since he spoke to Rick over the phone, he assumed Morty's frequent absences would be taken care of. But we also want to point out that Principal Vagina was quick to respond when he thought Morty was communicating that the new teacher was a predator. After all, who expects that someone would literally be from the moon? At the very least, we can say Principal Vagina took any allegations that came to him seriously. That doesn't mean he should go out and hit anyone accused in the school parking lot, but we understand the reaction. Next is another sort of friend of Summer, Nancy. Nancy is another trope-like character. She's portrayed as a self-conscious bookworm, often brushed to the side by everyone. including Summer. But while she often bows to the will of the people around her, Nancy is also shown to be able to stand up for herself and speak her mind now and again, such as when she confronts Summer at the house party, and when she expresses her concerns when Summer tells Nancy and Trixia about Morty's interaction with the space snakes. Next up is the planet Gaia. The planet that has a relationship with Rick. It's hard to be sure about how smart she is. On the one hand, we see that she's capable of creating metals and materials at will, able to provide everything that Beth and Rick need to build the society for her children. On the other hand, she's played off in the end as being manipulative, resorting to playing with Rick's emotions, and letting him believe that her children are his rather than admitting to Reggie being the father, up until Reggie shows up. She's a conflicting character for sure. Next, we have to include Noob Noob. This poor guy was used and brushed off to the side by the Vindicators despite desperately wanting to be one. But we don't rank him lower because we feel like Noob Noob is perfectly aware of the fact that it was a long shot to join the heroes on a mission. But that doesn't mean he wasn't going to give up. Noob Noob is seen constantly cleaning up messes, always wanting to put his best foot forward. And though he admires the Vindicators, he is also well aware of their faults and how ridiculous they can be, enjoying Rick's jabs and burns towards the team. Considering that the Vindicators were basically killed off by the end of that episode, maybe we'll see Noob Noob rise in the ranks. Next is Morty's love interest, Jessica. Much like Trixia, she's played up to be initially seen as a naive schoolgirl who is oblivious to Morty's affection for her. But the more we see her in the series, the more we see how aware of Morty's situation she is. She's able to help Rick reunite Morty's healthy and toxic personalities and is one of the few people at school shown to be nice to Morty, greeting him when he addresses her. She's well aware of Rick and had her own interactions with him, being called by a crying Rick who missed his Morty until they were able to get the teenager retoxified. Considering all this, Jessica has shown to be capable and not as clueless as we first assumed she is, gravitating towards Morty due to her interest in science and becoming genuinely curious about Morty's adventures with Rick. Next up is one of the Vindicators, Alan Rails. One of the more arrogant members of the Vindicators, he jumps at any chance to brag about his own powers of being able to summon ghost trains. We aren't really sure how useful the power would be since we don't really see it in action. Instead, Alan just gripes and tries to use brute force when any conflict comes up, such as when he grabbed Rick by the throat when the deadly game started. Alan also isn't great at figuring out when to confront a problem and use the tension that was already brewing to force Million Ants and Supernova to admit their affair. Bad timing, man. Next, we have the young woman from the Purge planet, Trixia. One of the many people caught in the crossfire of the annual massacre, she used Rick and Morty's ship to escape the carnage before tricking Rick and shooting him. Trixia was a young girl in a desperate situation, so we understand why she took the measure that she did. Though using the excuse of a relative needing saving was a poor one that she clearly stumbled through, we give Trixia points for being able to formulate some sort of plan to scare her leaders and try to get them to stop the killings. When she was caught by Rick, she smartly revealed what her intentions were so the scientists could offer some real help. She had no way of knowing her society would collapse without the Purge in place, so we still say it was a good effort on her part. Now we're really getting into the college-bound characters. These are the characters who are just a stone throw away from the top. All of them are truly intelligent. First, we have a short-lived addition to the Smith family, Morty Junior. A young alien that only knew the Smith home up until he was a teenager, he was easy to trick into staying in the house. But that doesn't make him dumb by any means. After all, he had no reason to not believe his father when Morty told him he would die if he went outside. When Morty Jr. went on his rampage, he was stopped with a simple song about hands, showing he still had the mentality of a child, having only been alive for a few hours. And we see by the end that Morty Jr. was able to find success and overcome his sheltered youth. Moving on to the terror, Scary Terry. He was a creature who was taught his only purpose in life was to be frightening, and if he couldn't accomplish scaring people, he was a failure. His whole education revolved around how to use people's deepest fears against them, meaning the education involved a lot of psychology. So when it comes to the human mind, Scary Terry is incredibly informed, which we see in his interactions with his wife when he lashes out, and when Rick and Morty help him in his own dreams. Next up, we have Mr. Meeseeks. Despite being alive for only a short time, the Meeseeks are able to handle almost any problem. They're shown to have an understanding for sports, relationships, and general human behavior. And when pushed too far, they're shown to be relentless in finding a solution to ending their existence. Sure, the Meeseeks are said to specialize in simple problems, but they've shown to be useful far more. It was a tricky choice, but we opted to place the talking cat next. We give the talking cat some points for being able to cover up his violent past. He knew to involve himself with people like Jerry or kids more interested in partying, so they didn't learn the truth about what he was. But at the same time, he never really makes it clear if he wants to be asked questions or not. He states that any answer he gives wouldn't be satisfying, and so to just roll with it, while at the same time he pouts over not being interrogated on what he is or where he comes from. Honestly, pick a lane. Moving on to the horrible King Jellybean. He's not the only corrupt king in the show, but he is one of the most traumatizing. He was one of those guys who was able to use his status and influence over the people to pull the wool over their eyes and hide his true nature. King Jellybean was a scumbag, but he knew how to play people to keep them in the dark, and we admit that took some form of resourcefulness and manipulation. Next up is the president, a man who rose to power on the idea of representing the people. He quickly became fixated on the idea of having Rick and Morty work for him at the drop of a hat. He took a personal offense to the two blowing him off and began reacting to them like a child throwing a fit on a playground. While it was amusing to see a grown man throw a fit over not being respected the way he wanted, we also see his reasoning. The president had to represent the country and be seen as a figure of authority, and so any outright disrespect towards him was considered to be treason. At least it was when Rick went about it, basically breaking into the Capitol and getting several security guards to get killed in the crossfire. But the president also knew when he couldn't be beaten, and smartly admitted defeat to Rick. Next we have the canine Snuffles. Going from the dog who peed on the rug in front of his owners, to leader of a new world, Snuffles proved to have quite the transformation. We can't place him higher on the list, since it was Rick's technology that gave Snuffles the footing to be seen as intelligent. But we can't fully disregard all that Snuffles was able to accomplish once he was able to communicate with humans and form an army. We know some people might complain, but we have to place Beth next on the list. Yes, she's a surgeon and that takes a lot of skill, but Beth is also one of the most easily influenced characters in the show. It obviously doesn't make her dumb, but it does occasionally make her do dumb things. She takes Jerry back despite knowing that things between them aren't stable. She trusts her father with her kids even though she knows what he does, and she completely ignores the experience with the mythologues and how toxic they portrayed her relationship to be. But when we see the other version of her, Space Beth, we also see that Beth has the ability to challenge the Galactic Federation and make a name for herself. Next up we have the nerve gas, Fart. Considering himself to be a higher form of existence, he is able to use his powers to warp people's emotions, so they do as he wants. But this power leads to Fart being cocky. He was able to get Morty to free him and gain Morty's sympathy. But then, just as he was about to head home, he revealed his entire plan to Morty. Honestly, why would you tell someone that you're going to come back with an army and kill them and everyone like them? And how calm Fart is when he says it, you just know that he didn't even consider Morty doing anything about the information. Moving on, we get to the first half of the infamous duo, Morty Smith. We know Morty isn't the best student, but he's displayed that he's not as much of an idiot as everyone thinks he is. Morty is one of the few people in the family who can call people out for acting up, usually with the other person being Summer or Beth. He knows how to get Rick to cave and do things for him for a change, such as making the reset technology and getting Rick to take Jerry on an adventure despite Rick hating Jerry. Morty was able to rally the other Mortys together to fight what they thought was the evil Rick, and had been the one to solve all the games Rick set up for the Vindicators. Not to mention being able to beat Rick at checkers in that wiped memory. But in the end, Morty is also just a curious kid who makes a lot of mistakes, and has to learn from them. Usually Morty is just chalked up as an anxious kid, but his anxiety comes from a reasonable place. Following her brother is Summer. Much like her brother, Summer is able to call out other people and look at things objectively. But she also gets swept up a lot in her emotions, and that typically leads to her going with the flow or acting out. She makes stupid choices like her brother does, including trying to give herself bigger breasts and making herself a giant by accident. But she's also a lot like Rick in the sense that she usually knows when she's being used as a scapegoat or a crutch, as seen when she tells Jerry he's bored and trying to start drama, or when she makes her dad admit to being a closeted racist. She's also trusted by Rick to carry out certain safety measures, such as in the Morty's Mind Blowers episode when she was able to get Rick and Morty's memories back for them. Next is the marriage counselor Glaxo Slim along with Dr. Wong. Both are well educated when it comes to relationships. Both are able to talk a person through how toxic their lifestyle is in a non-threatening manner. But neither of them know how to get through to people like Beth and Rick who are, to a degree, content in the direction their life is heading. Moving on to the devil himself, Lucius Needful. Running a shop full of items that are found out to be cursed is not the most creative thing he could be doing, considering we've seen countless setups like this before, and it isn't really clear how he's able to translate this occupation to a website later on in the episode. We also had to dock him some points for trying to use Summer without any foresight to how she would react or how she would use her grandfather to get revenge. But we also have to admit that Lucius managed to be a success when it came to how he wanted to be seen by the general public. Next up, we have Ship. Yeah, she's a machine, so her intelligence is the result of programming, but we still feel it's only right to give her a higher spot after all she accomplished. Like Snuffles, she gained her intellect from Rick, but was able to find a way to use it in a unique way. She followed all of Summer's requests, but Ship showed she could really mess with a person either physically or psychologically. And in a single night, she was able to end a war between the humans and spiders that had been going on for generations. Moving on to Bird Person, later to be known as Phoenix Person. When interacting with Morty and Beth, he reveals quite a bit about Rick and their past, exposing himself as a wanted criminal. He even makes a note that he was becoming too intoxicated and was sharing more information than he needed when speaking to Beth at the wedding. We knock him down a few spots because of one key thing: his awareness of members of the Galactic Federation at his wedding. One could argue that he didn't call attention to it because he wanted to be able to get married and not ruin the day for Tammy. But if that was the case, then it really didn't work out in his favor. Rounding out this category, we have another friend of Rick's, Quanchy. Sure, we don't see a lot of him, but we felt he earned a higher placement than a fair amount of other characters based on one action in particular: getting Rick and his family to escape the ambushed wedding. He was able to not only get Rick to snap out of it, but uses his ability to change his size to fight off Federation agents, and give Rick and his family the chance to flee. Finally, we have the Geniuses. These characters are capable of running large-scale operations. They're dangerous and powerful because they know how to outsmart everyone. First up in this category, we have Tammy. An agent of the Galactic Federation, she was able to pull off growing close to Rick's family by using Summer. After meeting Bird Person at a house party that Rick hosted, she quickly moved in and established a relationship with the wanted man. Tammy was even able to get Bird Person revived and use his love for her to hunt Rick down alongside the Federation. Taking the next spot is Mr. Poopy Butthole. When we see him during the heist episode, we see that Mr. Poopy Butthole is a respected professor and well-trained fighter, which is quite the change from him once being suspected as a parasite. Unfortunately, he lost his job after he wound up landing the students that attacked him in the hospital. We also wanted to point out his willingness to forgive Beth for shooting him, knowing why she had done it and what the stakes had been. Next up is Doofus Rick. Though he's been labeled the dumbest Rick, he's still a Rick. There's no doubt that he's got some questionable habits based on what Rick informed Jerry of, but we can't help but also appreciate the good we see in this character. He's able to use his talent for science to create things that make people happy, including bakeless brownies. When Jerry shows off his collection of coins, Doofus Rick assures him that so long as the coins brought Jerry some joy, that made them valuable, and he shouldn't be embarrassed by that. Next is Cop Morty. A dirty cop, he's able to use the drift between Morty's and Rick's on the Citadels to get away with a lot, including killing his last partner in order to keep benefiting from Big Morty. His final display of trying to get his new partner to show pity on him shows just how good of an actor he could be, and how he knew just what to say to get a Rick to let their guard down. Following his temporary partner is Cop Rick. Since he came out on top over Cop Morty, we have to place him higher than his temporary partner. Cop Rick may play by the book, but he also was a quick learner. After being shanked by one Morty he thought he was helping, this Rick wasn't going to make the same mistake again, even if it was the Morty he was supposed to be working with. Moving on to another Vindicator, Supernova. The surviving member of the Vindicators, she was also incredibly full of herself. We have to place her high on our list because, in the end, she was able to survive the games Rick set up and got away with killing her teammates. She knew her status as a beloved hero would make up for any blood that may end up on her hands, with Supernova able to play it off as getting rid of a threat. We can't forget about the pleasant assassin chromopolis Michael. This guy had to have been good at his job to be able to get the consistent work and fancy weapons he had. Not to mention a business card that would make Patrick Bateman from American Psycho fly into a jealous rage. Without a doubt, if Morty hadn't interfered, Chromopolis would have continued a long career in killing. Our next spot goes to the hivemind, Unity. She puts a lot of thought into how to use her powers to maintain peace in the galaxy. While there are some moral dilemmas that some are brought up, we can't argue with the results Unity achieved. And though she clearly loved Rick and got a lot of joy out of spoiling him with her powers, she also knew that they weren't right for one another because of who she became when she was around him. And that takes a lot of insight and self-discipline to reach that kind of choice. Next is the storylord. Much like Reggie, he was going to take advantage of beating Rick to a pulp while he had the chance to do so. But unlike the once godlike figure, the storylord had more motivation. He wanted to be able to use Rick and Morty in order to break through the fifth wall. That couldn't be an easy thing to pull off. Not to mention the fact that Storylord maintained a train of endless anthologies, which is impressive to say the least. Our next ranking goes to the Galactic Federation and the Citadel of Ricks. Both are powers that control the people, but they do have slightly different methods of doing so. The Federation like to drug their citizens and give them pointless rewards to keep them from rebelling. The Citadel used fear and degradation. Both methods have worked well enough for societies in the past, but both of these powers have one thing in common. They were taken down by Rick in a single afternoon due to their cockiness. Our fourth most brilliant character has to be Zeep Zanflorp. An unintentional copy of Rick, he resides in the multiverse battery and wound up copying Rick's idea of how to generate power. Right away, we see the obvious similarities with these two. Both have a disregard for the public school system offered to them, believing it to be for the less gifted. In the end, Zeep was left having to cave to what Rick wanted, but we have no doubt that he'll return with a vengeance. It was a close call, but we have to give the Bronze Medal of Brilliance to Evil Morty, better known now as President Morty. While Cop Morty was a great actor, this Morty earned an Oscar for his performance. He was able to use his former Rick as a puppet and a cover, killing countless Ricks and using their Mortys as a way of hiding his location. Once it was safe, he rose to power again, stating he wanted to unite the Ricks and Mortys of the Citadel. When the Shadow Council tried intimidating him, Evil Morty came back just as hard, having many of them executed on the spot. The Silver Medal of Brilliance we're giving to the Testicle Monsters, or Time Cops. These creatures have mastered time and space in a way that even Rick hasn't, as seen when they had to intervene with the split timeline. These creatures are shown to be capable of jumping around time and space with little to no trouble, only intervening when they feel it necessary. But we do have to place them second for mistaking Einstein as Rick and beating him up. That was a pretty funny mix-up. And I'm sure it's no surprise, but we're giving the Gold Medal of Brilliance to Rick Sanchez. Love him or hate him, Rick always finds a way to come out ahead. Declared the smartest man in the universe, Rick always finds a way to come out on top. He's able to wipe mistakes from people's memories, played his daughter against Jerry, took down 2 major governmental powers in a single day, solved major political issues on Earth in the name of the president, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. We aren't saying Rick is perfect, but he's earned his massive ego with the amount of victories under his belt, most of which come solely from his intellect. But what do you think? Which characters in Rick and Morty are the most dumb and the most brilliant? Let us know in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit that notification bell and binge our other videos. If you haven't seen our Rick and Morty Good to Evil video, make sure to check it out. But most importantly, stay wicked.